my brother whispered. Say hello to the sharks. And shoved me off the yacht in the middle of the ocean. My wife just stood there, smiling. Their plan was to steal my $5.6 billion fortune. But when they came home, I was waiting, with a gift just for them. David, they said. Family sticks together. Mine? They tied me to an anchor and then, my brother, Nate, leaned in and whispered. Say hello to the sharks. My wife, Lydia, she just smiled like it was Tuesday. They left me to die, right there, in the middle of the ocean, all to steal the $5.6 billion I built from nothing. But here's the thing, I didn't drown. And when they finally came home, I was already inside, waiting. Now, I had a gift for them too. The Florida Keys, man, they glowed different at sunset. The water turns this soft, impossible orange, like the sky is just melting right into it, and everything feels quieter than it should. That night, anchored offshore on my yacht, I felt it. Peace. Just for a moment. We were celebrating another good year. My company had just closed 2 massive contracts, and I thought, hell, let's give the family a memory. A private dinner on the water, just me, my wife, and my younger brother. The boat swayed, a gentle rhythm beneath us. Waves tapped against the hull like an old friend, reminding you they're still there. I leaned against the polished railing, a glass of bourbon warming my hand, letting the wind hit my face. Salt, warm air, Nate's easy laughter behind me. It all felt like something I'd truly earned. Lydia, my wife, looked absolutely stunning in that navy blue dress, her hair pinned up, a glass of white wine in hand. The way she smiled at me, it reminded me why I built all this in the first place. For her. For us. Nate, well, he was on his 3rd drink, grinning like a teenager who just got away with something. Ever think about slowing down, big bro? He asked, patting my back. Harder than necessary. Slowing down? I chuckled. That's not exactly in my vocabulary. He raised his glass, clinking it against mine. To never slowing down. It felt sincere, almost. But something in his eyes held a little too long. I turned to Lydia. She was watching us. No, she was watching him. A glance, a flicker of something in her expression that just didn't belong at a family gathering. I blinked, and it was gone. She smiled again, softer this time, and looked out at the horizon, like she hadn't noticed the exchange. I tried to brush it off. Told myself I was being paranoid. This was my family. My blood. My wife. But the thing is, sometimes the heart notices before the mind allows itself to catch up. Dinner was elegant, quiet. Grilled mahi, some kind of truffle risotto. Lydia loved that kind of food, more about the name than the taste. Nate kept pouring drinks. Come on, he said, filling my glass again. You finally let yourself relax? Don't stop now. Lydia giggled, that light little laugh she always used when she was trying to keep things smooth. My stomach twisted, and not from the alcohol. Still, I played along. Laughed. Smiled. Clinked glasses? Because that's what you do when you've spent your life believing that loyalty means ignoring the little things, even when they start adding up. By the time the sun dipped beneath the waterline, we were up on the bow, just the 3 of us. Nate leaned on the railing next to me. Lydia stood a few steps back, barefoot, sipping wine like it was just another evening in paradise. Ever wonder? Nate's voice was low. What it feels like? To lose everything in an instant? I turned to look at him. What's that supposed to mean? His smile didn't reach his eyes. He leaned in closer, whispering, Say hello to the sharks. Then he shoved me. Hard. There wasn't time to scream. The world flipped upside down. My back slammed against the rail, and the ocean swallowed me in one clean gulp. The cold hit first. Shocking. Biting. Unforgiving. I kicked upward, gasping, and when I broke the surface, I spun around, coughing, clawing, trying to see Lydia. She stood at the edge, but she didn't scream. She didn't move. She just smiled. Then she turned her back. Gone. Just like that. The pain hit second. Not physical. That would have been easier. This was different. The kind of pain that sits deep in your ribs and spreads until it takes over everything. Lydia! I yelled. But the boat was already drifting farther. Nate! I shouted. Nothing. Just the low purr of the engine, then silence. Waves crashed into me, pulling me under. I kicked, fought. My shoes dragged me down. I kicked them off. Struggled to stay afloat. Every stroke burned. Every breath stung. I thought of my father. The way he once said, "A man's real strength shows when he's got no one left to lean on." I always thought that was about business. Now I knew better. This wasn't an accident. This wasn't some sick joke. They meant for me to die out here. For the sharks to finish what they started. And you know what the worst part was? Not the betrayal. Not the fear. Not even the cold. It was knowing that the people I loved most had planned this. I went under again, swallowed salt water. My lungs screamed. My vision blurred. And as the darkness closed in, a thought sliced through everything. If they think I'm dead, then maybe I can use that. Maybe being dead is the only way to finally fight back. And for me, David, it was the beginning of something far greater. That thought hit me right before everything went black. I didn't float. I sank. Salt stung my eyes. My chest burned. Water clawed at my throat. But I didn't panic. I wasn't ready to die. Not yet. Not like this. When I finally broke the surface again, gasping and coughing, the yacht was already a distant shadow. No sound. No voice calling out. Just the hiss of waves slapping against my face, and a soft hum of betrayal lingering in my ears. The sky had turned fully dark. Stars blinked above like they didn't give a damn. I clung to a piece of floating wood. Maybe part of a broken crate, or a loose panel from one of the jet skis. Whatever it was, it kept me alive. And that was enough. I lay there for what felt like hours, drifting. My fingers cramped. My legs numb. But I didn't let go. I couldn't. Every second alone in that black ocean, I kept hearing Nate's voice. Say hello to the sharks. And seeing Lydia's face, that smile she gave me. Not fear. Not regret. Just satisfaction. The kind of smile you give when a long game finally pays off. I thought I knew pain. I'd faced failure before. I'd started my company with nothing but a garage and a half-broken laptop. I built it from scratch. Brick by brick. Deal by deal. But nothing. Not even bankruptcy. Not even losing my mom. Nothing cut like this. This wasn't business. This was family. And they left me to die. I tightened my grip on the wood, jaw locked. They don't know me. I don't drown. Somewhere far off, a flicker of light broke the horizon. At first, I thought it was a hallucination, my mind playing tricks. A star falling too low. But it moved. Wavered. Then steadied. A boat. Small, probably no more than 30 feet, but real. I screamed, waved, nearly slid off the board. Tried again. Hey! My voice cracked, raw from the salt. Please! Hey! The boat didn't turn at first. I waved again, beating the water like it owed me something. Then, slowly, the light shifted. It got bigger. Closer. A figure leaned over the side, a flashlight cutting through the dark. Dios mío! A Spanish-Cuban accent. A splash of water. Then the slap of rope hitting the surface. Hands grabbed under my arms. Strong. Calloused. Next thing I knew, I was hauled over the side like a soaked duffel bag. I collapsed on deck, coughing up seawater, barely able to move. The man knelt beside me, pressing a towel against my face. Can you hear me? You okay? I nodded. Barely. Name? He asked. I paused, just for a second, then answered. Eric. Not my real name. Not the one my brother would have listed in the Coast Guard's missing persons report, assuming he even bothered. The fisherman, mid-50s, maybe, had eyes that had seen enough of life to recognize when not to ask more. He didn't push. Just handed me a thermos of hot coffee and a blanket. Strong tide tonight, he said, glancing at the ocean like it had betrayed him too. Where's your boat? Charter? I croaked. Was on a dive tour. Fell off. They didn't notice. He stared at me for a second longer, then nodded. Lucky you found me. Not many come this far out. I let the heat from the thermos warm my hands. My muscles were screaming, but my mind was sharp. Focused. This man didn't need the truth. No one did. Not yet. I needed silence. Space. Time. So I said little, just enough to keep the story alive. He told me his name was Hector. Fished mostly for grouper and snapper. Worked nights to avoid the charters. Simple. Kind. Hector didn't talk much, which was exactly what I needed. As the engine hummed and we headed back toward shore, I stared at the horizon. Lights from the coast shimmered, faint in the distance. Civilization. Miami. And somewhere in that city, Lydia and Nate were probably drinking champagne, toasting to my funeral, spinning some tale about a tragic accident. Poor David lost it. See? How terrible, how sad. Maybe they were already lining up lawyers, dividing my assets, claiming my company. Let them believe I was gone. It gave me time. Gave me space to move. And that was power. I wrapped the blanket tighter. Closed my eyes for a second. And in that darkness, memories came flooding back. Late nights building code. Pounding pavement for investors. Sleeping under my desk. Every contract I signed. Every hand I shook. Every damn time I chose family over profit. All of it. I didn't claw my way up from nothing just to let them bury me in the ocean. They wanted the empire, but they forgot who built it. They forgot who bled for it. I am the fortune. And now I'm a ghost. Unseen. Unaccounted for. That's a hell of a good place to start from. As Hector's boat pulled into the marina, and the city lights reflected off the waves, I made a vow right there on the deck. No one would see me coming. They buried the wrong man. They thought the ocean buried me, but I was already walking back toward them. One step at a time. I slipped off the boat before dawn broke. Hector offered to drive me somewhere, but I politely declined, told him I had a friend nearby. He didn't question it. That's the thing about men like Hector. They've seen enough to know when to ask less. I walked along the docks, barefoot, salt still on my skin, a hoodie covering most of my face. The few folks out that early were fishermen unloading their catch or cafe owners dragging in crates of fresh fruit. Nobody paid me any mind. And that's exactly what I wanted. I crossed through the side alley of a narrow street in Little Havana, ducked past a pair of kids stacking bread behind a bakery window, and stopped in front of an old building. I'd passed it countless times before. Paint peeling off the walls, a rusted staircase clinging to the side like it was one storm away from collapse. But I remembered this place. Years ago, when I was just starting out, I'd helped the old owner of Cafe Dolores set up her payment systems. No charge. Just saw she was being overbilled and fixed it. Didn't think anything of it back then. This morning it saved me. Her son, Luis, ran the place now. Older than me by 10 years. Beard graying, eyes warm but sharp. He didn't recognize me at first. Not in this state. But when I quietly said, "You used to call me kid when I fixed your card reader," his face changed. Didn't ask for details. Didn't need the full story. Just motioned me up the stairs. A narrow room above the cafe. Twin bed. Old ceiling fan. Tiny sink in the corner. Nothing more. But it was quiet. Dry. Safe. That was enough. Louise handed me a fresh towel and left without a word, just a nod. A second later, I heard the sound of eggs sizzling downstairs. I stood there for a while, letting the silence settle around me. Letting my heartbeat slow. I was alive. I was back. And no one knew. That's when the real work began. By mid-morning, I'd cleaned myself up. Wore jeans and a loose polo I found in a drawer, probably from Louise's kid. Tied my hair back. Trimmed the scruff from my jaw. I looked different. Smaller. Thinner. But not weak. The mirror didn't show the man who used to walk into boardrooms and close deals with a handshake. It showed something sharper. Quieter. More dangerous. I walked a few blocks to a small shop that sold prepaid phones, bought one in cash, then took a different route into Brickell, Miami's financial heart. Not through the front, like I used to. Through the back street service entrances. Side doors. Old instincts came back fast. I made my way into the lobby of a discreet private wealth firm, one I'd used for years, but never publicly. There were only 3 people in the world who knew I kept assets there. One of them was Greg Winston. He used to handle high-risk restructuring for my company. Brilliant guy, a little too cautious for my taste back then, but loyal. When I pulled back from certain overseas ventures, Greg stuck by me. Didn't question why. I repaid him with discretion. I moved a piece of my portfolio, about 18%, into a blind trust under his watch, just in case. And today, it was no longer just in case. I stepped into his office without knocking. He looked up and froze. He didn't speak right away, just stared, then whispered, "David?" I closed the door behind me. "Not here," I said. "Not by name." He blinked, then slowly stood and closed the blinds. 5 minutes later, we were in a soundproof room in the back. "You're supposed to be dead," he said. "That's the rumor." His hands trembled slightly as he poured water into a glass. "Jesus Christ, what the hell happened?" "They happened," I said quietly. "My wife. My brother." Greg didn't ask for proof. He'd always been a man who could read between the lines. "They're already making moves," he said after a pause. "Your accounts, the public ones, there's activity. Lots of it." I nodded. "Which is why I need to shift the reserves. All of it. Move it under lock." He hesitated. "David, if I do that, and someone notices, they won't." I cut in. "Not unless you tell them." He looked at me. Really looked. Then nodded. We worked in silence for nearly an hour. Transfers. Access keys. New safeties. By the end of it, I had a trust so deep under legal layers that not even the IRS could sniff it out without a war. Only Greg and I had the keys. And that was enough. "Why now?" he finally asked. I leaned back in the chair. "Because if they think I'm gone, they'll show who they really are." He stayed quiet, just nodded again. Then, almost as an afterthought, he said, "There's one more thing." I looked up. "They're throwing a party," Greg said softly. "Tonight. At your house." I blinked. "What kind of party?" "The kind that says, let's celebrate the man we just buried, and everything we just inherited." I sat there for a long moment, not speaking. Inside, something flared hot and focused, but my face stayed still. I stood. Smoothed out my shirt. "Perfect," I said quietly. Greg looked unsure. "You okay?" "Never better." Then I smiled. The kind of smile they never saw coming. "Perfect. Let the party begin." I didn't go back to Louise's place. Instead, I changed in the back alley of a laundromat 2 blocks away. Pulled on black slacks, a dark shirt, and a jacket I bought earlier that afternoon at a thrift store with cash. Nothing fancy, just clean. Silent. No labels, no attention. By the time the sun dipped below the horizon, Miami's humidity clung like wet gauze. I took the long way to the house. My house. Keeping to the dark edges of side streets, cutting through backyards where the fences were low and the dogs knew me. And then I saw it. My estate. Lit up like a damn movie set. Every floodlight on. Music bleeding through the palms. Laughter. Champagne glasses clinking somewhere, far too loud. You build a home with someone, you remember every corner of it. And when you come back as a stranger, every step feels like trespassing. I stayed outside the fence for a while, just watched. The gates were wide open. Security was minimal. Of course it was. They thought the danger had drowned. The only man they feared was gone. It was almost laughable. I slipped in through the garden path. The stones still had my initials engraved near the koi pond, something my wife once insisted made the place ours. The roses along the wall had overgrown a little, untamed without my gardener to shape them. They looked like they'd stopped caring too. Through the window, I saw her first. Lydia. Her hair curled, makeup thick, skin glowing under chandelier light. She wore the same diamond bracelet I gave her on our 10th anniversary, the one she said she'd never take off unless I betrayed her. I guess she redefined betrayal. She was leaning back on the armrest, swirling a glass of champagne, laughing at something my brother whispered in her ear. God, that laugh. Not the one she gave me when I made a fool of myself dancing in the kitchen. Not the warm, tired chuckle at night after long days. This laugh was sharp. Cold. Decorative. And there he was. Nate. My younger brother. The man who used to trail behind me in high school, asking for tips on girls and job interviews. Now he stood tall, chest puffed, like he belonged there. He didn't. He never could have built what I built, but he was damn good at waiting until someone else built it for him. I crouched behind the hedges as a pair of guests walked past the patio, one of them a lawyer I'd worked with years ago. They're announcing it tomorrow, he whispered. Power of attorney, full control. Poor David. But it's a win for the firm. They clinked glasses, moved on. I felt nothing for a long second, then everything at once. But I didn't move. Didn't blink. I just memorized every face, every life floating around that party. Retribution only works if you let it simmer. I slid around the side of the house, keeping low along the path I'd helped design myself. It led to the side entrance the staff used, mostly hidden, half buried in the wall. I knocked once low. A pause. Then a soft click. The door opened just enough for a face to peek through. Miguel. My old groundskeeper. 58. Vietnam vet. Loyal as they come. I helped pay for his granddaughter's surgery 3 years back. He never forgot. His eyes widened. I held a finger to my lips. He let me in. Inside, it smelled like lemon polish and old tile. The basement hallway hadn't changed. I kept walking quiet until I reached the service stairs. Another figure was there. Rosa. She froze when she saw me, hand to her chest. I thought you. I nodded. Yeah. Everyone did. Tears welled up. She didn't ask questions. Just pulled me into a hug so tight I almost forgot why I came. Almost. I'll need access to the camera grid. I whispered. Rosa stepped back, wiped her cheek, then pointed to the utility room. 10 minutes later, I was inside, screens glowing. They had disconnected most of the original surveillance, but not all. I reconnected the hallway feeds, the office camera, and 2 hidden ones I'd installed long ago but never told Lydia about, just in case. I downloaded backups, saved new recordings, reset admin access. No more secrets in that house would go unseen. I stepped out and looked at Miguel. I'll be back soon. Keep quiet. Keep watching. He nodded. Whatever you need. I moved through the corridors like a shadow, reaching the edge of the ballroom without a sound. And that's when I saw it. In full. Lydia and Nate standing at the top of the main stairs. Everyone's eyes on them. Flashbulbs popping. Laughter like glass breaking. To the empire I now control. Nate said. The crowd cheered. He added louder. To the man who never knew how to protect it. That stung more than I thought it would. Then Lydia leaned in, whispered something in his ear. He smiled. The smug kind of smile only men with short memories and borrowed power wear. I took one step closer, to the edge of the archway. No one saw me. No one heard me. But I looked straight at them and whispered to the air. Protecting it wasn't the problem. Trusting you was. The lights had gone out hours ago, but my mind didn't. I spent the rest of the night in the same study I built years ago, tucked behind the service wing, hidden from anyone who didn't know its door was disguised as a bookshelf. From in there, I could watch them. Every camera angle. Every mic Rosa had rigged just hours before. They laughed. They drank. And they planned my funeral like it was some afterthought. Nate paraded through the rooms like a king who never went to war. Lydia clung to his side, wearing the same silk robe she once wore only for me. They didn't just kill the man, I realized. They killed the memory of him, too. And yet here I was. Still breathing. Still watching. And they hadn't seen the first move yet. By the time the morning sun cracked over the edge of the ocean, I had already put phase 1 in motion. The new documents had been swapped in, thanks to Miguel and Rosa, and every single keystroke on the estate network was being mirrored to a remote server I set up before I left for my so-called trip. Let them sign. Let them lie. Let them think they've won. I stepped out just after dawn. Took a slow walk through the side corridor until I reached the edge of the boardroom. I didn't enter. Just stood there behind the partially open door. They were already inside. Nate, in a tailored navy suit that didn't fit his swagger. He never wore suits well. Always looked like a kid dressing up for court. Lydia sat beside him, polished and poised, hair tucked behind her ear, her voice soft, almost broken. If I hadn't heard her hours before, I might have believed she was grieving. The family lawyer, Mark, a balding man with glasses perched on his nose, sat at the head of the table, flipping through a thick binder of legal jargon. We'd known each other for 15 years, and yet he couldn't even tell the air in the room had rotted. He cleared his throat. Thank you both for coming early. I know it's been difficult. Lydia nodded gently. We're just trying to honor his wishes. Nate smirked. It's what he would have wanted, Mark. The business needs leadership, stability. We're just stepping in. I could barely contain the bow rising in my throat. He kept going. This house, this fortune, after all these years. It's finally ours. Ours. That word. Like he ever earned it. Lydia put a hand over his and gave a practiced sigh. He built this for the family, and family moves forward. Mark gave them both a nod. Right. Well, the paperwork has been reviewed. Your legal authority will be finalized once these documents are signed. Power of attorney. Estate transfer. Ownership of the main accounts. I watched as Rose's camera above the archway tilted ever so slightly. Still working. Still feeding me everything. I shifted my stance, reached into my coat, and pulled out the burner phone. One tap. Recording began. Nate leaned forward, resting his elbows, like a man delivering a TED Talk. You know, growing up in his shadow is never easy. Always the smart one, the golden boy, the one Dad called the builder. But who's here now? Who's signing the papers? Lydia laughed, quiet, cruel, poetic. Isn't it? Mark looked a little uncomfortable, but kept going. Just need your signature here, Nathan, and Emma's initial on page 32. Miguel stepped in just then, casually, like he was delivering coffee. He placed the tray down, gave a small bow. Anything else, Mr. Nathan? Nate grinned. No. Go polish something. Miguel nodded, then walked out. But I knew what he'd really brought, the final version of the decoy paperwork. I had checked it twice before sunrise. They'd be signing over nothing. Paper ghosts. Traps dressed as inheritance. And on record, in full view of the camera behind the light fixture. Lydia leaned in. Let's finish this. I watched her pick up the pen. Watched Nate roll his sleeves. Watched Mark pull the folder closer. Flipping to the last page. This was it. They were about to sign away my life? No. What they thought was my life. In truth, I'd already rerouted the business accounts. The trust funds were locked under emergency clauses they didn't even know existed. Lydia's power of attorney led to a holding company in Belize controlled by me. Every asset they thought they were claiming was just paper. But I wanted them to believe it. To smile. To toast. To bury themselves deeper. Mark tapped the pen on the folder. You sure you want to proceed? Nate chuckled. Mark, I've waited 20 years for this. Let's make it official. And right then, I stepped just slightly into view. Not fully, just enough that my shadow stretched across the doorframe. They didn't see me, but I saw them freeze for a half second. Lydia's hand jerked. Nate looked over his shoulder. Nothing. I was already gone again. Just a whisper behind the wall, but I spoke it anyway. Quiet. Controlled. Go ahead. Sign your betrayal into history. The pen clicked. Mark smiled, warm, clueless. Nate tossed the pen down like he just signed a movie deal. Well, that's that. Lydia leaned over, her breath brushing his ear as she whispered. It's ours now. They thought the ink on paper was the finish line. I knew better. From my vantage behind the concealed panel in the hallway, I watched every move, every smug glance, every hollow laugh. I didn't need to be in the room to feel it, the air thick with victory they hadn't earned. Mark gathered the documents carefully, tucking them into his leather briefcase like a priest carrying sacred text. I'll have the filing submitted before close of business today. You two should prepare for transition meetings by Monday. Nate grinned. We'll be ready. Lydia turned toward the window, watching the breeze ripple through the poolside palms. Feels different, doesn't it? She said. Like the sun shining just for us. She wasn't wrong about the light. Noon had slipped into that golden hour glow, the kind that makes even betrayal look beautiful. They stood, stretching like cats who just devoured their prey. Lydia was already planning the redecorations in her head. Nate muttered something about replacing all the security staff. That wouldn't go well for him. He turned to Mark. Let's open the vault. Mark blinked. The vault? You mean the legacy room? Nate nodded, already walking. We want to look at the good stuff. The old man's war bonds, the original deeds, the family jewels. Let's see what we inherited. Lydia linked arms with him. And don't forget the tapestries from France. I've always wanted those moved to the foyer. Mark hesitated. Well, all right. I suppose there's no harm now. He led the way toward the west wing, not noticing Miguel stepping silently from the corridor, sliding the second set of keys into my palm before disappearing. I moved through the service tunnel that paralleled the main hallway, arriving before them. The vault had 2 layers. The first was cosmetic, ceremonial. The second was mine. Hidden deeper. Smarter. When they entered, Mark motioned to the biometric panel. Only one person can open this. Lydia raised an eyebrow. And that would be? Mark gestured toward a framed photo on the wall. My photo. Nate scoffed. He's dead, Mark. I pressed the remote from behind the wall. The scanner chirped green. The lock slid open. They froze. Lydia stared at the door like it had just spoken. Nate stepped back. What the hell? Mark blinked. That shouldn't have. The door creaked open. They walked inside slowly, all replacing arrogance. The room was exactly how I designed it years ago. Spotlights cast soft halos on antique cabinets, drawers labeled in gold leaf, walls lined with shelves that held more than just valuables. They held stories. Generations of them. Lydia moved toward a velvet-lined box and opened it. Inside was a single envelope. She looked around. Where are the bonds? Nate tugged open a drawer. Inside were documents. All right. Only, they didn't say what he thought they would. What the hell is this? He muttered. Lydia opened another. More paper. More nothing. Mark peered over their shoulders. This isn't the inventory I was given. Lydia's voice rose. Where are the original ownership files? The oil contracts? The incoming account logs? Nate flung a box onto the table. These are copies. Who swaps out originals with photocopies? I nearly stepped in, nearly showed myself. But instead I watched. Listened. Every document they touched was another thread of the web I had spun. Altered copies that looked real, until you read the fine print and realized the names were changed, the signatures wrong, the dates just slightly off. Nate ran a hand through his hair. He must have changed everything. Lydia's face tightened when Mark still looked lost. None of these are enforceable, he said. These are placeholders. Backup files. Archives. Nate turned to him then. Where are the real ones? I leaned against the wall. Arms crossed. Safe. Very safe. Weeks before any of this happened, I'd moved the critical documents, every account, every deed, every confidential ledger. They were no longer here. They were in legal limbo, under a shell company run by a man named Jonas King. Jonas King doesn't exist, but the LLC does. And I control it. They didn't take over anything. They just walked into a trap made of their own greed. Still, they smiled. Still, they celebrated. Nate didn't care. We'll fix it. It's just paperwork. We've got the estate, the business, we've got the public face. That's what matters. Lydia added cold. He was always too paranoid. That's why he died alone. I clenched my fists behind the wall. He was weak. Nate continued. That's why we survived and he didn't. I felt the words like teeth sinking in. Lydia crossed her arms. His only worth was building something for us to take. It was the truth stripped bare. I wanted to break through the wall, grab them both, scream, tear down the lie they'd wrapped themselves in. But I didn't. I stayed quiet. Because patience was my real weapon. Their arrogance would bury them better than I ever could. The staff arrived with champagne. Lydia had ordered it an hour ago. Mark excused himself, awkwardly muttering something about filing delays. Nate popped the bottle like a college frat boy. To us, he said. To what we earned? Lydia held her glass high. To the empire that's finally ours. And I whispered, just loud enough for the hidden mic to catch. Drink up. The celebration won't last long. But they clinked their glasses, like they just won a war. As I stepped out of the vault room, the soft clatter of silverware echoed from the grand dining hall. Evening had painted everything gold. The sun had dropped low enough to stretch long shadows across the marble floor. And in the middle of all that glow they sat. My wife. And my brother. Draped in the illusion of victory. I didn't rush. Let them wait. Let them toast a little longer. By the time I entered, a round of laughter was already fading into smug grins. A laden table groaned under the weight of a feast. It was a king's feast. Or at least, that's what they thought. Finally, my wife said, flashing a smile too wide, too perfect. We were starting to think you'd fallen asleep in the vault. I gave a nod, pulled out the chair at the head of the table, and sat. She leaned in with a whisper, the perfume of her victory thick in the air. It's really happening. Everything. It's ours. Across from her, my brother raised his glass. To us, he declared. The new heads of the empire. Long may we reign. They clinked again. The sound sharp and hollow. I watched the champagne fizz and thought, they really believe this is their coronation. No. They are toasting at their own funeral. Dinner unfolded like some twisted play. Everyone playing their role to perfection. The lawyer, Mark, sat off to the side, nursing a brandy, clearly pleased to be done with the paperwork. Clean deal. He mumbled once between sips. Solid signatures. Watertight. I let him believe that. It wasn't his fault he was blind to what was really unfolding. My wife, God, she looked radiant in that candlelight, but the kind of radiance you see on a snake's back right before it strikes. She basked in every compliment, nodded at every lie my brother spun, fed off the attention like she'd waited her whole life for this moment. I've already got decorators on call, she said, swirling her glass. The Miami penthouse needs a refresh. Something regal. Don't forget the yacht, my brother chimed in. We're renaming it. He smirked at me across the table, eyes gleaming. What do you think, brother? Dead weight has a nice ring to it. My wife burst out laughing. I mean, she added, it's only fitting. He was dragging this family down for years. Might as well give him a send-off. I didn't flinch. Didn't blink. Just carved into my lamb and smiled like none of it cut me. But inside, that blade twisted deeper with every word. I told myself what I had told myself 100 times before, not yet. Patience. Their arrogance was my weapon. Earlier that week, long before this little circus, I had met with Hector, our head of security. Not at the estate, not anywhere traceable. I need every room recorded, I told him. Every word. Especially the dining hall. He didn't ask why. He just nodded. Tonight, in the corner of that chandelier-lit room, tucked behind a false panel, was a pin-sized lens streaming everything to a secure server. Voice recognition. Timestamped. Geotagged. Every joke. Every insult. Every self-incriminating word. That was one layer. Another? Those documents they were so eager to sign. Not the originals. Not even close. The originals had been moved weeks ago. Restructured. Reworded. Rerouted through a new corporate trust under a name they couldn't trace even if I drew them a map. Their signatures had just finalized their liability. I hadn't stopped the betrayal. I'd moved it. The mood shifted slightly when dessert hit the table. Mark, the lawyer, furrowed his brow at a folder still sitting near his briefcase. Strange, he said, flipping a page. This clause wasn't here earlier. What clause? My brother asked, mouth half full of creme brulee. Just a typo, my wife interrupted, too fast, too smooth. Honestly, let's not ruin the mood. Everything's done. Mark glanced my way. I met his eyes. Calm. Unreadable. I could see the flicker of doubt begin to take root. He didn't know yet, but the ground beneath their chairs had already started to crack. I picked up my glass, not champagne like theirs, just water. Held it for a moment, then raised it slowly. To family, I said. They turned toward me. The kind that teaches you what betrayal really means. Silence. Not a long one. Just enough for the air to change. My wife's smile twitched. My brother stopped mid-laugh, eyes narrowing. And for the first time since the circus began, they looked uncertain. Not scared. Not guilty. Just that first flicker of unease, like a man realizing the car he's driving doesn't respond to the brake pedal anymore. That was all I needed. A crack. And tomorrow, I'd split it wide open. The glass was still in my hand when the silence finally settled. I set it down gently. No rush, no weight in my movements. But inside, something shifted. The room felt different. Not louder, just still. Heavy. Thunder rumbled somewhere outside, low and distant, like the sky itself was listening. My brother forced a chuckle, but it came out thinner than he probably intended. Damn, that's a dramatic toast. Even for you. I didn't answer. Didn't need to. Because I saw it, for the first time all night. There was something else behind their eyes. Not pride. Not gloating. Not even irritation. It was fear. Not enough to make them run, but just enough to make them pause. I leaned back in my chair and slid the folder across the table, right in front of Mark. Before we all turn in, I said quietly, I figured we'd do a little reading, since we're so fond of contracts. He hesitated, glanced at my wife, then at my brother, then opened the cover. They both leaned forward. Lydia scoffed before she'd even read a word. "What is this? You printing bedtime stories now?" I didn't respond. Page after page. The lawyer's fingers slowed, his brow folded in tight lines, his jaw clenched. My brother reached over and grabbed one of the pages, scanned it, then shoved it aside. "This is fake, obviously. What kind of idiot do you think I am?" "A brave one," I said, "to speak so boldly on a wiretapped line." His face froze. "October 4th. I added. 3:17 p.m. You told Greg to push through that offshore transfer, skip due diligence. Your exact words were, and I quote, "Who cares? It's not my money." He blinked. I turned to my wife. "And you, December 12th. You instructed Maria to destroy the first batch of reports. Not revise. Destroy." She rolled her eyes. "None of this will hold up in court." It already did. Her face dropped just a hair. "Not much, but enough. I submitted everything this morning," I said. "Filed. Timestamped. All of it. This," I tapped the folder, "this isn't for court. This is for you. So you understand how thoroughly you've already lost." Mark stood up abruptly, paper still in his hand. He looked pale, sweaty, like a man realizing he'd stepped into a minefield barefoot. This wasn't in the final draft. He mumbled, more to himself than to anyone else. "No," I replied. "Because you never saw the final draft. I handed you the version I wanted you to see. You were too busy sipping scotch to notice the switch." His lips parted, but no sound came out. He turned toward the door, didn't make it. Two of my men, silent until now, stepped forward, not armed, just present enough. "Sit down," I said. He obeyed. That's when I saw it click in his head. He wasn't their shield anymore. Wasn't their asset. Wasn't even their witness. He was just another pawn. And I had flipped the whole damn board. My brother shot up from his chair, slammed both fists into the table. "This is bullshit. This is garbage. You can't do this. You were just bitter because we finally outplayed you." "No," I said calm. "I'm not bitter. I'm just thorough." He pointed a shaking finger at me. "You're going to regret this. You hear me? You think you've won?" I looked him straight in the eye. "I don't think," I said. "I know." He turned to Mark's wife, like maybe she'd have a lifeline, but she just stared down at her plate, frozen in place. Cowards lose their voice when the lights come on. Then came her voice. My wife's. Low. Cold. Almost venomous. "You ruined everything." "For what? A little revenge?" I stood slowly, walked to the head of the table, and picked up the small remote. Clicked it. The large wall screen blinked to life. Video feed. Their voices played back, perfectly clear. Her laughing about moving funds. Him bragging about who he had in his pocket. Their lawyer chuckling along. The whole table went still. The only sound left was the storm outside, louder now, rain tapping against the windows like a warning drum beat. I turned the volume down, leaned in just enough for them to see the calm in my face. "This wasn't revenge," I said. "This was a reckoning." The cameras in the dining hall flickered once, then twice, on the screen. New figures began to move. My allies. Positioning themselves. One by the front gate. Another at the east hallway. One more near the garage. All in place. My wife's eyes scanned the feed, finally realizing what was happening. She looked at me, really looked, and saw it wasn't a dinner anymore. It was an execution. The cameras blinked once more, and that was it. Whatever mask my wife had been holding on to finally cracked. Her eyes darted from the screen to me, to the doors, then back to the screen. Her lips moved, but no words came out. She looked hollow. The way someone looks when they realize there's no exit, and no one's coming to save them. The storm outside pounded harder against the windows, lightning flashing bright across her face. My brother stood frozen for a moment, chest heaving like he was trying to breathe through concrete. "For years," I said quietly, looking at all three of them, "I played the fool at this table. Tonight I pulled the strings." No one responded. They just listened. Even if they didn't want to. She reached out across the table slowly, like maybe if she moved gently enough, the nightmare would go away. We can fix this, she whispered. You still need me. I stared at her hand. The same hand that signed those papers. Move those funds. Texted him behind my back. No, I said. I needed honesty. You chose greed. She pulled her hand back like I burned her. Maybe I had. Then my brother exploded. He shoved his chair back with a loud screech and charged across the table, rage contorting every inch of his face. You smug. He didn't finish. 2 men moved in, fast and practiced. He didn't even make it halfway. They pinned him against the wall, 1 on each side. Still, he thrashed, elbows flying, kicking, spitting. Let go of me, he screamed. You think you're better than us? You think you're smarter? I stepped closer, just enough so he'd hear me over his own fury. Even caged, I said. You still act like an animal. I leaned in. But animals don't win against steel. He roared again, shaking like he could break free if he just screamed loud enough. He couldn't. No one was listening anymore. Mark, the lawyer, was still seated. Barely. He looked like someone had turned off the oxygen in his lungs. He opened his mouth once, then again, then finally managed something like a whisper. I didn't know they'd go this far. I tilted my head. Didn't you? His lip quivered. Look, he said. I was just trying to protect the estate. Do what they asked? Please, if we can just talk this through. Talk? I laughed once, not loudly, just enough for him to know how absurd he sounded. You helped them rewrite contracts, transfer assets, you forged timestamps, bury files, threaten people. I was under pressure. We all are. I cut in. But you chose to make a career out of hiding rot. He dropped his eyes to the table. You want leniency? I said. Call the court. The law might care about apologies. I turned away. I don't. My lead investigator walked over and laid 3 plastic bags on the table, each marked. Sealed, labeled. One held the shredded backup drive we recovered from his office. Another, copies of the accounts they opened under my name. The last one, a silver flash drive. Mark stared at it like it might detonate. It already had. I stood at the head of the table again, lifted my glass. No smile this time. No toast dressed up in sarcasm or fire. Just something final. Something clean. To the end of betrayal, I said, and to beginnings built on truth. She didn't speak. Didn't even flinch. Her eyes stayed on the wood grain of the table, as if it might offer a way out. My brother tried one more curse, but it died in his throat. He sagged against the wall, exhausted and out of weapons. Mark folded in on himself, like he was trying to disappear into his own suit. They looked like the ruins of something once proud. And maybe they were. But I didn't feel triumphant. No part of this tasted like victory. Just clarity. Cold. Clear. Undeniable. They thought the ocean would swallow me. That I'd drown in the loss, in the shame, in the loneliness. They didn't know the tide could cleanse too. Tonight, I buried the man they tried to break. The fool who smiled through their cuts. The husband who believed every lie. The brother who stayed quiet for peace. And what rose in his place? Not a king. Not a warrior. Just a man finally free. A man with nothing left to prove. And no one left to fear.